Yo, what up, street dogs? There, Kim. All right, the thought. How the nerds have hijacked society. So this is my basic gist. So for the most part, technology, the internet, social media, blah, blah, is controlled by the nerds, is built by the nerds, and the problem with modern society is it's this increasingly nerdification of society. So let me expand and elaborate. So what is a nerd? I don't mean to say someone's a nerd just because they're smart or intelligent, whatever. I tend to think of a quote nerd as, somebody who kind of lacks social skills, social awareness, or courage to interact with real life human beings. So, and when I call people nerds, it's totally tongue in cheek. It's like, dude, we're all nerds in one way or another. But then the big problem is when society becomes too extremized one way, that's not a good thing. So let me give you practical examples. So, consider all the big tech companies. They're all built by nerds. So for example, Mark Zuckerberg, nerd. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, nerds. And I think if you just kind of look into people's personal backgrounds and where they're coming from and how they did stuff, they're a bunch of nerds, right? And so the problem about the nerdification of society is that we tend to think too much about things from like a computer science, kind of mathematical view of humans and humanity, rather than quote humanism, which is like human forward type of thinking. So let me give you a practical example. So we all talk about AI, machine learning, blah blah. How come ain't nobody talk about yo, what up? How come nobody talk about human intelligence, right? HI seems like it could be a far more effective thing. So, for us to become more critical and for us to start thinking more about, how can we augment our human intelligence, our bodies. And this is also the trend in Silicon Valley, which is also run by nerds, is there is no respect for the human body. We think that, you could just take a magical pill and you could live forever or whatever. Or also this nerdy idea that the body doesn't matter as long as you're smart. So, whenever I meet people in Silicon Valley, typically people have very, very poor physiques, very poor bodily composition. My heuristic is simple. I don't trust nobody who's never deadlifted or done heavy squats like ass to grass, or nobody who's done powerlifting. So that's just my heuristic, is that if you can do heavy deadlifts, I respect and admire you. If you've never even stepped inside a gym or tried something difficult physically, there's going to be some sort of gap in terms of your human knowledge of understanding of just humanity. But anyways, so it's interesting because certainly science is good, math is good, STEM is good, but we also need to blend it with kind of maybe a more critical philosophical lens, because honestly at this point science has become a new god. So for example, certain myths which exist, or certain it sounds intelligent, sounds scientific. I think Nassim Taleb calls it scientism, which is for example, people want to lose body fat, right? And most of American society and a lot of places in the world are over fat. The term is now over fat, not overweight, because you could be overweight and in great physical shape. Fat seems like it's actually the enemy. But anyways, so it's the whole calorie in, calorie out, this uber ultra simplified notion that the human body is like batteries and like an engine, and it's like a diesel powered car, and in order to move you must have a hearty breakfast because that's the motor of your body, that's the battery of your body. But it's no, the human biology and metabolism is a quadrillion times more infinitely complex than anyone's ever figured out. So the fact that I deadlifted 455 pounds, that's 4 plates and 25 on each side. I did this while fasting, so certain, and then, you know, like, I don't have great genetics, and also I think notions of genetics is just kind of a low-key racism. But anyways, so like I've been able to do that while fasting, and there's so much like misconceptions in the scientific community and also just like the CS community. Everyone thinks that, you know, just buy the newest iPhone, buy the newest app, buy the newest whatever, and then suddenly all your life's problems will disappear. But we need to be more critical, and yeah, I think the future is actually going to be more focused on human physiology. Physiology meaning having to not just do with the head, but the whole body, right? From your toes to the top of your head. And I think there's this ancient Chinese proverb, which is like, you die from your feet upwards. And the gist of that is, as long as you walk a lot, and you stay physically healthy in terms of, you know, like even when I'm on my laptop, I do a standing desk. Even I've been doing this new thing where I put my laptop on top of my knee and I kind of balance it on one knee, and I kind of like, you know, do it like a little flamingo when I'm working my laptop. And so the more we can move around physically, the more fresh air we get, the less time we can spend in a car. And I'm very anti-cars. I think a car-less society is probably the best society. So the more we could move, the more we could interact with real human beings, obviously socially distant, put on your face mask, whatever. And yeah, and the more we could walk, the more we could explore, the more we could kind of like lift weights, and not do it in this kind of scientific nerdification way where we gotta like quantify everything, because, you know, and there's like all the modern thought has been hijacked with like, you know, the whole like, I think it's Peter Drucker who's like, if you can't measure it, you can't progress. But then it's like, you don't need to, like, I mean, you could measure it, yeah, sure, that's fine. But then there's this silly notion that if you do not measure it and you cannot track your progress and you cannot quantify your progress, that is somehow meaningless. But then you think about this more philosophically, would you quantify your human relationships with your friends, your love for your mom, your love for your partner, whatever it may be? And so yeah, let us become a little bit more skeptical and sus of nerdy thinking. Let us think about more in terms of dynamics rather than statics. Let us think much more about complexity than oversimplifying complex matters. Let us also start to understand about like human biology, human physiology, metabolism as being a quadrillion times more complex than we understand. Let us be anti-notions of calories in, calories out. Even when it comes to studying like the effects of sugar, it's a metabolic disease, and we should call it a disease. I don't like people, oh, everything in moderation. I'm like, bro, would you give your kid heroin in moderation? No. And so even the big problem about sugar, and even like the quote-unquote natural sugars, is that it causes your body to react in very strange ways. And so just do some research on like, you know, insulin responses to sugar, carbs, simple starches, whatever. And so even for me, I follow more of like kind of more of a carnivorous diet. I typically fast all day, and then when I break my fast, I try to do a Ramadan style, right? Like break my fast around like 8 p.m. ish nowadays because of the summer, and then I'll just eat like 5 pounds of pork belly and a ton of bitter greens and herbs and stuff like that, because I think people also tend to think simplistically. They're like, whoa, you eat so much meat, you're so unhealthy, you should eat more vegetables. I'm like, dude, I eat 5 pounds of meat and I'll eat like 3 pounds of like kale or collard greens and stuff like that. So let us just think more complex. Let us not get suckered by easy lines of thinking. And yeah, ultimately experiment for yourself and discover a deeper truth for yourself.